Hi everybody, this is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, and I'm going to take a look at a couple of recent games I played in a local tournament. No especially prestigious opponents, but I think that's part of the charm and value of these games, in that they'll both show, I think, common kinds of club play errors in action. Both of these games are Kings Indians, and I'm white in both cases. Normally speaking, it's not an opening that I face an awful lot. I'm not generally a d4 player, although I try to vary my openings around. But for variety, I mean, if you can't play something a little bit out of the ordinary when you're playing lower-rated players, then you'll never do it. So it's good to vary around and experiment with new things, especially in a more safe kind of context. So part of the point of this presentation is to show, again, some typical errors that can be made at the club level and to help you avoid them in your own games. Okay, so this is the first game. So I had white, and here we are in one of the main line positions in all of chess. Okay, white has played many moves here. The most popular move is to simply castle, and then knight c6, d5, knight e7, and here white has kind of a difficult choice in some ways. White wants to play the move c5. All right, so this is one of white's basic strategic ideas to achieve this advance. But it's a little tough to do it. Okay, it's not that tough, but I mean, it takes a little preparation. Now, the nicest move to be able to make here would be bishop to e3. This would be great, but knight to g4 kind of thwarts that, plus then black can play f5 straight away. So one common move for white here is to play knight to e1. And the problem with this is that after knight to d7, let's say bishop to e3 or knight to d3. Let's do knight to d3. f5. Okay, let's say bishop to d2, knight f6, f3, f4. Okay, now white plays c5. But the problem here is that this knight on d3 is kind of stupid, in that after this exchange takes place here, we'd really like to have the knight on c4. That would be ideal. Okay, well, so let's go back here. And maybe you can play knight to d2 instead. All right, the problem with this, though, is that, all right, let's say black plays a5, a3. One kind of common approach for black is to play c5. It's not the only move here, but it's a main move, and this thwarts it. And, of course, I'd rather have the bishop outside here on e3. Okay, well, still another idea here is to play b4. All right, so this is the so-called bayonet attack, which is very popular, and this isn't bad. But, one thing the black can play is a5, and still white's development gets a little bit, is a little bit funny. Okay, he doesn't get to put all his pieces on ideal squares. So I decided to try the move bishop to e3. Now, this is no novelty. This is a very well-known variation. It's called the Gligorich system. And it's very effective against a lot of club players. Okay, maybe not against experienced kids or stronger players at a club, but my opponent here was 1700, a very experienced player, but not a player who, let's say, is really focused on his repertoire in a kind of rigorous way. So he's kind of playing on general impressions, and that's what I expected. And so he played knight to c6. I played d5, knight e7, knight to d2, knight e8, c5. f5, okay, let's make some more moves, and knight to c4. And I've managed to get everything that I wanted. So my bishop on f2 is on the diagonal that I want it to be on. The pawn has made it to c5, free of charge, very easily. The knight is on c4, where I want it. So in short, I got everything. And in fact, even better, I didn't start with castling. So remember back here in the main line, it starts with white castling. Well, in this position, I haven't castled, so even if black goes crazy with his kingside attack, I could just castle queenside or leave my king in the center and quite possibly avert all of his aggression in that way. So this has been very successful, and we'll see in the game that things really go pretty smoothly from here. Okay, well, what should he have done? Well, in fact, there are a lot of moves here. I mean, there's no, I think, one clear-cut, absolute best move. But the basic idea, or I should say the basic move, if black is kind of harboring ambition still of getting into something like the d5 systems, knight c6, castles, knight c6, d5 stuff, then maybe he should play knight to g4. So bishop to g5, f6. Okay, sometimes the bishop goes to h4, sometimes it goes to c1. They're both very common. Let's say bishop to h4, knight c6, d5, knight e7, knight to d2, knight h6, although h5 is also important, and so is f5. But in any case, we can see that we're slowly but surely working our way back into that kind of setup where black is able to start pushing his kingside. So that said, white's still in perfectly good shape here. Anyway, this would be the way that you should play with black if you like this kind of opposite side attacking race. But there are other very good ways to play. So after bishop to e3, knight a6 is also quite good. And again, let's say castles. Again, you can play knight to g4. Or sometimes white plays d5, and then knight to g4, bishop g5, f6, bishop h4. And again, inevitably, black's kingside pawns are going to slowly but surely trundle their way down the board in hopes of creating some mayhem against the white king. All right, still a third try is to play e takes d4, knight takes d4, rook e8, f3, c6, with the idea of d5. And Kasparov had some very interesting games in this system. He played against Karpov and drew, and later on against Gelfand and won. So bishop f2, d5, ed, cd, castles. c5 is also quite important. I believe that's what happened in the Karpov and Gelfand games. And we have very sharp play here. So white has a great knight on d4. The pawn on d5 is isolated. But black has very good possibilities on the dark square. So we can see e3 is kind of a weakness. You might be seeing something like knight h5 coming up, hitting here, and it could be further pressure on d4. So there's a lot of ways by which black can kind of amp up the pressure on the dark squares. Okay, I think there's one other system too. C6 can be played, knight b to d7 can be played. So really quite a lot of different ways for black to handle this sort of position, and they lead to very different kinds of play. But again, what you can't do, at least not if you hope to be anywhere near equality, is to play as if white had castled instead with knight to c6. So let's see what happens. Okay, so again, I've pretty much gotten everything I could want. Still have to win the game, of course, but it's a very comfortable position. Okay, black played rook to f7, typical kind of idea in these positions to play bishop f8, rook g7, knight g6, h5, g4, and so on. So the rook helps to keep an eye on c7, the bishop will help keep an eye on d6. Okay, well I'm going to keep advancing on the queen side. I could prepare to just take on d6 and jump on the c file, but I think there are things that I can do that are more profitable. I'd like to play, let me get rid of all that stuff, I'd like to play a4 and a5, and then possibly play knight to b5, take, and then I'm hitting a7. And if he plays a6, then I get the b6 square. And that's part of the idea behind playing the pawn to a5. However, if I play a4 straight away, I at least have to consider a5 as a response, and the attempt to block the queen side a bit. Of course, I'm much better here too, but I decided that I didn't want to even allow this and played b4, which is fine. Knight g6, a4, h5, a5. Okay, so now in addition to the idea of playing cd and knight to b5 in some order or other, there are also possibilities like playing c6. After c6, okay, if he takes, I take, and then I get the d5 square, plus also this diagonal opens up. And if he doesn't take, well, c takes b7 is not bad either. And he definitely can't play b6, because then ab is just winning. So here he decided to play a6. Okay, but now I have something that I wanted. So I took, and I took again, and played bishop to c5, followed by d6. Okay, well this certainly makes me quite happy. Here I think he had to play c takes d6. I'm certainly better in the position, but he can still thrash around. He played c6, which it's logical. I mean, he wants to keep my knight off of d5, and he's trying to keep the center closed and prevent me from coming in on the queen side. So here I think I found a good idea. Okay, first of all, bishop to c4 doesn't achieve anything because of bishop to e6. I could play queen to b3 and exchange off the light-squared bishops. Normally speaking, that would be good for white because the black's light-squared bishop is important for his kingside attack. Of course, my king isn't there yet, so there may not really be any attack. At any rate, I think I found something better. So knight to a4. Okay, this is obvious. Bishop to e6. But now the unobvious part was bishop to b6. So now I take over the d8 square, so he's not putting a rook there. I can bring the bishop to c7 if need be as well. And I clear c5 for the knight, from which square it hits e6, hits b7, supports the d7 pawn advance, and of course I have the idea of playing knight e6 and then bishop to c4. So he plays knight to f8, which makes sense, protecting the bishop some more, but also intending to blockade on the d7 square. Knight to c5, knight to d7, takes, and here I make an inaccurate move. I should have played, I think, either bishop to c5 or bishop to c7. But what I played is okay. I played rook to c1. Now, I'm still clearly better if he plays knight b6. AB, bishop f8, bishop c4, queen f6, say queen b3, and he takes. Okay, I'm going to, of course, grab the exchange at some convenient moment, and I'm much better, but I'm definitely not winning yet. And it would have been better for me to not even have allowed this possibility by playing bishop to c7. But okay, my inaccuracy was met by his mistake, and now I played bishop to c7. And here he decided to simply call it a day. You know, he could resist and try to keep the blockade as long as possible, but I have too many pawn breaks. You know, I'll play bishop to c4, I'll play queen to b3, and try to swap off everything there on f7. But because I have breaks like g3, h4, and even in some cases b5, with the point that cb will give me the open c file, and after ab, then a6 in some cases will lead to the collapse of his queenside. So given all of those breaks, his resignation, while it's a bit early, is it basically is a time saver for him. So anyway, he called it quits here. Okay, well, let's take a look at the next game. All right, and playing another opponent. This one slightly below 1700, though he's been over 1700. So again, certainly not doing this to brag about the opposition, but because I think the games are instructive. Okay, so by a different move order, we reach the same sort of thing, except here he played knight b to d7 instead of e5. Okay, so I castled, e5, rook e1, ed knight to d4, rook e8, bishop to f1. And here, okay, this is a pretty well-known position. The main moves here are knight to c5, threatening the e-pawn, so f3, and now, of course, a5 to cement the knight on c5, so I can't play b4 very easily. Here, the main move for white is to play knight d to b5. And the point is to impede c6 and to pressure here. And white has, I think, an edge in this position. I would certainly prefer white here. A second idea, though, is to not play that way, but to play c6. And this is a more flexible, more fluid approach. And I think black is okay here. I mean, this I think is again a much more dynamic way to play, not going for this rigid plan of just putting the knight on c5 and leaving it there forever and hoping that this will be enough to keep white restrained. So here there are a lot of moves that white can play and has played. It seems like the most popular moves haven't scored overwhelmingly well, whereas some less popular moves have done very well. So probably f3 is a good waiting move, but okay, on f3, d5 is pretty reasonable. b3 is another plausible move, again just trying to keep everything nice and solid. But okay, you know, black can play knight to c5 now, and after f3, a5, and black has at least achieved something that he wanted to obtain. So his knight is there, but he's also gotten c6, so he's prevented the knight d to b5 plan. Okay, another move that's interesting for white is rook to b1. Okay, here black should play a5. Okay, b3, knight c5, f3, and guess what? We're back where we started from a couple of minutes ago. Still another idea here is to play h3. So still another kind of high-class waiting move to keep the black knight off of g4 or a bishop off of there, but mainly the knight from g4. Okay, well once again a5 can be played. Now bishop to f4, knight c5, queen c2, knight h5, bishop e3, and white has actually done pretty decently here, but it's still a very interesting position. Black can retreat the knight to f6, maybe play a4, and it's anyone's game. So this I would say is the way to play this variation with black if you get it. So again, knight b to d7, castles, bishop to e3 is also possible here too. So white has alternatives along the way as well. Castles, e5, and here too, bishop to e3 is perhaps, bishop to e3 is I think the main line here. Okay. But rook to e1 is also exceptionally popular. I mean, they're both, I think, about equal in terms of their popularity. All right, so anyway, let's continue with the game. So rook to e8, bishop f1, knight f8. So this move struck me as kind of unusual. I mean, I understood that he wanted to play knight to e6, but he could have kind of done it for free by playing knight to c5. I mean, I'm going to play f3 in response, and then he could play knight to e6 straight away. So here I could play f3 and that would transpose, but I decided to play bishop to g5. All right, he played h6, bishop h4, knight e6. Now here, okay, maybe taking and f3 is good for an edge for white, but I decided black's position is cramped, so I should avoid exchanges, and I played knight to c2. Okay, he played bishop to d7, f3, a5. So finally, he's grasped the importance of playing like this. Queen d2, bishop c6, rook a to d1, queen e7. So this was, of course, just a poor move, but actually it's not so bad. The funny thing is, after knight to d5, queen to d8, maybe my knight shouldn't be there. Maybe that's not the ideal square for it. Well, I mean, it is a good square, but maybe it's there too soon. Anyway, here I made a tactical error, which my opponent didn't realize, and I was just kind of going on autopilot. I was, in fact, moving very quickly in this game because we've all heard of this big snowstorm that's hitting the East Coast. So we're kind of on the path, in the path of that storm. So I was trying to finish the game quickly, get home before the snow is accumulating to insane amounts. I mean, we had like 5 inches that earlier in the day, and going to get anywhere from 6 inches to a foot the rest of the night. So I was trying to speed up, and it was a little too fast here. So I probably should have played b3. So instead I played knight c to e3, which is positionally a great move, but there's a tactical problem. So do you see what it is? It's knight takes e4. So after this, the position is only equal, and I'm the one who's having to prove the equality, sadly. So bishop takes, knight takes, takes, and rook takes. And after all of these captures, at the end of the day, material ends up even, and it should just be a draw. Now, I think I would have found some way of complicating it, even taking some risks, I would hope anyway, but I shouldn't have allowed this in the first place. So, it's okay to be fast, but you have to be fast and accurate. Better to be right than fast. So, this is one of these things that happens when you don't play an opening too often. Sometimes you lack familiarity with some of the tricks that are there. So, interestingly, I had seen knight takes e4 ideas earlier, but had stopped calculating them at this point, and then black would have been okay. So be aware of that. Always keep an eye out for these tricks, especially when they can rescue you. All right. Well, here my opponent was, of course, afraid of the following: knight f6, bishop takes, queen takes. Okay, before my knight was on c2, so if I played queen h6, he'd have queen b2. But now I have knight to g4, and I win this pawn for free. So to avoid this, and this I had sort of anticipated when playing knight c to e3, he played g5. Of course, this is a very bad move positionally, because now I'm going to screw the knight in on the f5 square, and he's not going to have a good time with it. So bishop to f2, bishop d5, and now c takes d5, and here white has a winning position. The remainder is very pleasant for me, less pleasant for him, but I hope you'll find it at least entertaining. Okay, so he plays knight to c5. So his knight finally reaches the promised land. All right, I play knight to f5. I like my knight's promised land better than his. Okay, he plays bishop to f8. Now I play h4, trying to open him up. So he plays knight to h7. Okay, well now I have bishop to b5, and the rook can't go to e5 because then I have bishop to d4. So he plays knight to d7. All right, well let's take a look at this position. It's only going to get worse for him, but it's already pretty bad. So the rook can't move anywhere without being attacked. I mean, it's either lost or it goes to e5. I play bishop to d4 and it has to retreat. So the rook's got essentially no moves. The knight has no moves because, of course, the rook will hang. The queen has only one move because it has to keep this guy protected. So queen to c8 is it. Queen e7, of course, drops the queen. Okay, what else is there? The rook has only a7 to go to because anywhere else it would drop the a5 pawn. The knight from h7 can't move because then he'll drop the g pawn. The bishop from f8 can move, but only to g7. So black is rapidly running into a zugzwang here. And, well, again, it's only going to get worse quickly. So I played rook to c1. My idea is very simple. I'm going to double heavy pieces on the c file, and then he'll either lose the c pawn or lose the a pawn, or most likely in the long run, both. All right, so he moves one of the few things that he can move, but now I play bishop to d4. And this is most unpleasant for him as well. He could retreat the bishop. That's not much fun, but he could do it. If he takes, then after queen takes d4, it's hopeless. I'm threatening queen g7 mate, and I'm threatening knight takes h6. Not really anything you can do about the latter. So that would be an easy win. So he played f6. Okay, now I'm very happy, of course, because this bishop is completely out of play. He's taken the f6 square away from his own pieces. All right, so we just add on the fun here. Played queen to c3, and from here he just collapses. Of course, he should play rook to c8. After this, I have a number of good moves. Of course, there's simply queen takes a5. I was also considering knight takes d6, cd, queen c8, takes, and bishop takes d7. I'm not sure I would have done this because at least his rook can come in to... well, his rook can't go to c2 because of bishop to c3, which I had seen, followed by bishop to a4. But I don't know, maybe he can go to c4 or something and be slightly annoying there. I mean, I want to have the c file, so even though he can't do anything with it, I kind of want to have it. So, you know, this is obviously still easily winning, but maybe it's not the absolutely most forceful way to go. Anyway, he didn't bother with this, but played rook to f8. So he just wanted to get out of the pin. I took, and he played rook to f7. But, okay, now he just starts bleeding everywhere. So knight takes d6. There goes the second pawn. A lot of good moves here. Knight to c8 might be the best move, but what I did is fine. Takes. Knight b7. If he plays rook to b8, which is better, okay, it's better, but it's not really good. Rook to c7, hitting the knight, and let's say on this, then d6, rook f7, bishop to c4. So he's still losing a lot more material. Anyway, in the game he played rook to a8, and I was thinking about rook to c7, I was thinking about d6, and felt, okay, d6 will just force immediate resignation, and that's what happened. So d6, and black resigned. Okay, so this was certainly a fun game, although I definitely regret this tactical slip here. So this definitely takes a lot of the luster of the game away, but still I think it's an instructive kind of game, and it shows the sort of thing that white hopes for in this variation. Shows what black should avoid as well, and shows really, I think, some of the dangers of passive play in the King's Indian. So those of you who are club players trying this out, one of the difficulties with the King's Indian is that there's an awful lot of theory, and not just theory in terms of moves, but theory in terms of ideas and motifs and tricks. So I mean, even here I kind of fell asleep on the switch, or at the switch, and he did too. But in terms of the positional damage, we see what's going on. But still, there are some lessons here. So one is playing directly. So this knight f8 thing was way too slow, way too passive. Black has to play actively in the King's Indian, especially in this kind of Monokroussos bind structure. Secondly, Black should try to remain fluid. So this knight c5 and a5 approach is rather clunky. Not that it's bad, but in the position where white gets to drop this knight on b5, it's positionally very easy for white to play. So Black should probably try to avoid this. So that's why c6 is really a very nice solution. One which maintains flexibility, but also enables this knight to c5 idea. Okay, so again, this is very introductory, and of course, only scratches the surface, or scratches the surface of the King's Indian, or really even the surface of the surface. I mean, it's you know, just very, as I said, basic and introductory, and you know, only covering a couple of possibilities of very many. But still, I hope it's enough to give you at least a little bit of information and understanding that you might not have had before. Anyway, thanks a lot, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.